How's it going? My name's Tom, back talking about F1 Fantasy, and in this video I'm going to be discussing my team selection ahead of Australia, have a very quick look back at Jeddah, because personally I don't really want to look back at Jeddah, because it was really not a especially exciting race in particular, but also in terms of fantasy. It was just a bit pants. And once again, this team I've selected is very heavily reliant on the Red Bulls doing well, which obviously, finishing 1-2 succeeded, but everyone else was just pure pants. And I'm kind of fed up of this team structure as it is, and we're going to be jumping ahead and just diving in and switching the team up. Three transfers to use up, so let's just completely break the team. That's what we're going to be discussing this particular video. However, I do think there is some argument to be had that maybe this team is still fine, because I think if Stroll, and this is a big if because we're talking about Lance Stroll here, if Stroll had not crashed his car and actually finished the race, then Aston Martin would have scored probably roughly 30 points ish, and I'd be sat here on over 200 points instead of 181, and I'd be thinking, yeah, this is kind of fine actually. And Aston Martin probably would have got a price rise, which is what I was kind of expecting. I've picked Aston Martin on the strength of Fernando Alonso, but I'm starting to think that the weakness of Lance Stroll just detracts too much from the Aston Martin constructor. Of course, Lance Stroll's not going to DNF every race, and I still do think that having the Aston Martin constructor is a potentially good way to build budget. So this is why I'm kind of tempted to keep this build, but also kind of just can't wait to get away from this build. But yeah, I do think that there's something to be said for the Aston Martins. It's just Lance Stroll, man. Could you not just not hit the wall next time? Just don't hit the wall under no pressure. Stroll. You see the TV shots of Stroll just going straight into the wall, and then Ollie Beerman. I keep calling him Beerman. I don't know why I keep calling him Beerman. He's not a beer man. It's a bear man. Ollie Bearman. I can't do this. I can't say his name properly. Bearman. There we go. We got there. Bearman. Ollie Bearman just driving past the 18-year-old rookie on his debut, just gliding past, getting driver of the day, P7, etc. Fantastic drive from him. It just really compounded home for me that it's frustrating. I find it frustrating that I don't want to disrespect Lance Stroll, but I find it frustrating that people like Lance Stroll in Formula One, when you got the likes of Bearman and Lawson and so many other drivers that are just busting the gut, highly skilled drivers that can want to get in there, and we've got people like Lance Stroll that are just there because of the money. We know it's there, we kind of just accept it, but it just kind of came back to me a little bit in Jeddah last week when we saw that fantastic debut from Bearman that made it frustrating. So anyway, there's my kind of rant over Lance Stroll. Gotta have one every season. And look at this team: 17103878773064. My team name is against the guidelines. So please help me. If you've got any good team names for me, please comment below. I appreciate some ideas. Last year I had the big boys. Last couple of years I've had the big boys, but I kind of want to move away, have something a bit different. So I went with Pop Pan Man F1 because that's literally my YouTube name. But apparently Pop Pan Man F1 is completely offensive and an insult to F1. So they've changed my name to this stupid name. If you can help me out with a decent team name that obviously hasn't already been taken as well, that'd be great. Yeah. So anyway, let's have a look at the actual team selection. Once again, look at this team one, man, just sucking. Everyone else is doing well. Team two didn't do so great last week, but yeah, the team three is where it's at. And team three, although I went with Mercedes because I was a bit oh no, Ollie Bearman, I can't have Ferrari. Obviously would have paid off if I did have Ferrari. So I went with Mercedes instead. But yeah, I do think this build on the right over here is kind of where we need to go, and it's kind of where everyone's kind of divergent at the moment. As there was some debate what the best team structure is. Do we go all in Max Verstappen? Max Verstappen's clearly the most trustworthy pick, and therefore we must 2 times him. However, this build is just really not especially great in terms of building budget. We know that Verstappen and Red Bull are just solid, and we're relying on them heavily, and they're going to come up trumps 99% of the time. And Aston Martin, like I said, as long as Stroll finishes the race, should in theory go up in price, which is kind of nice. But I am kind of just fed up of having to support Lance Stroll, to be honest. This is not the anti-Lance Stroll video, by the way. I will stop talking about Lance Stroll right about now. But yeah, I do think that this build is still fine, but in terms of building budget, it's just not quite there. It's just, it's frustrating because what I want to be able to get to is obviously get rid of the likes of the 5th best constructor and bring in someone like Ferrari, but I just can't possibly do that. In fact, I don't know exactly how far away I am, but I'm probably at least a couple of million away from bringing Ferrari with the Max Verstappen build. And I know a lot of people will already be a lot closer than that, or maybe even be able to afford that. If you can afford Verstappen, Ferrari, Red Bull like now, then seriously go for it. I just want to kind of scroll all the way down. I just want to kind of see if I put all the cheapest of the cheap in there, exactly how far I am, just so I can get an idea. So we just add in all the cheap chaff. Yeah, I'm like a couple of million away, aren't I, at least? Why is this scrolling so difficult? Right, 30.4. Yeah, 2.4. I'm a million miles away, really. A million miles away. And that's because I've maybe not taken risks as such. And I think having this build of the base of Red Bull and Ferrari from the get-go is kind of where the budget's been. Look at Perez and Leclerc going up a million. And then I'm sat on Verstappen. Yeah, Verstappen's got more points, which we all expected and kind of accepted. That's why we went with Verstappen, or why I went with Verstappen. I know a lot of you didn't go with Verstappen. You went with the likes of Perez and Leclerc, and you've reaped the benefits. But yeah, I'm starting to feel, I'm quite honest, I'm starting to feel just very slightly anxious about my budget. And we're only 2 races in. I know it's a long season, blah blah blah, but there's going to be teams within, maybe already, but teams within the next week, 2-3 weeks that are probably going to be able to afford the Verstappen, Red Bull, Ferrari kind of structure, and then budget fodder in amongst it, and that's going to be really, really powerful because one of these days, a Perez or a Leclerc, who we got the 2 times on, one of these days they're just going to DNF. They're just going to finish 5th, 6th, 7th. They're going to have a bad race. Verstappen has that supreme consistency which is why I've started the season off with him as the 2 times. But I'm just falling away in budget, and I'm not sure. Short term, Verstappen's get me more points than the likes of Perez or Leclerc, although he's actually not, because I've been let down by the likes of like the Aston Martin constructor. If the Aston Martin constructor, if Stroll could finish a race, then I think this is still a fine build, but I'm just not sure I can rely on them. And meanwhile, the Ferraris are going up 0.3 every race because they are quite clearly the second best constructor. And there's already rumours around saying that they're bringing in quite a sizable upgrade in as early as round 4. That's literally the race after Australia in a couple of weeks' time. Like, we could be seeing the Ferraris once again getting closer, pushing those Red Bulls to the limit potentially. That he says dreadfully optimistically. But yeah, I do think that Ferraris are kind of important to get in. While 0.3 rise is not very exciting, every week that we don't have them in, and we're having the likes of the RBs or the Aston Martins or even Mercedes or whatever, we're just kind of getting away from the Ferrari build, and they've already gone up 0.6 over the course of 2 races, and I don't want to fall behind a budget anymore, so I'm kind of locking myself in. If I just reset my team just so I can go back to what I've actually got, like I said, I do think there's something to be said for keeping Aston Martin, because I think, if they do okay, then they should go up 500,000, they should go up 1 million. They're kind of in that good range to get budget, so it's frustrating that they didn't go up last week, but there we go. So yeah, kind of what I'm looking at is getting rid of all this chaff here. When I said chaff, I'm referring to Bottas, not Verstappen, and putting in someone like Perez, maybe Leclerc, and then having 10 million left over. And who can I afford? Can't quite get to Lance Stroll there, so thank God I wasn't going to go for him anyway. I'm probably just kind of interested in getting a couple of Haas drivers in, which is almost absurd to me because all of last season, Hulkenberg qualifying high, falling back, the Haas race pace, both Magnussen and Hulkenberg as drivers also make me very slightly nervous that they're capable of getting into skirmishes that, as a fantasy manager, you don't want your drivers to be doing that. So that does also put my heart up in my mouth when I'm watching the race a little bit. But we can't deny that the Haas have looked pretty decent in terms of race pace this season, and that could serve Hulkenberg pretty well. We could see him qualifying well and also kind of maintaining position, or even potentially clawing up a position or 2, which is kind of fine. So I'm quite happy in terms of consistent and experienced drivers, kind of having them in, and I'm quite happy to go over a build like this. I've got loads of money in the bank for this, but in terms of budget building, the Ferrari should hopefully keep clawing up 0.3, 0.5, depending on maybe how well they do. And I'm not really worried about if Behrman's back in this week. If Sainz, the whole story of Sainz and appendicitis and being back in the paddock the very day after having his surgery is completely bonkers to me. Like, coming out of surgery and leaving the hospital and then literally going to work the next day after having your appendix removed is just, it's crazy. So I'm not entirely sure that he is actually going to be fit enough, as much as he might desperately want to drive in Australia. I don't know. This is still still got a whole another week as of the time of recording before the actual race weekend begins. So we've still got plenty of time to find out a bit more news about whether Bearman or Sainz will actually be racing. But even if it is Bearman, I'm absolutely kind of fine going with the Ferrari constructor because Bearman filled me with confidence that I didn't have last week. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at a team like this. I mean, Perez, as long as he keeps getting P2s or even a P3, can kind of just about stick with Verstappen, then this build is fine. It's when Perez has one of those dreadful weekends, which he's very capable of, as we saw last season. If he has that sort of weekend again and he finishes anywhere like P4, 5 or below, and he's your 2 times, or even if he DNFs and he's your 2 times, so Verstappen's just sat there at the top of the pile getting another 45 points in there. It's gonna be a real kick in the teeth, and that's what's put me off from going for a build like this so far, purely because of Verstappen's consistency. Like my whole team selection for the first 2 weeks is basically been based on Verstappen's consistency, but now I'm starting to worry because my budget's fallen away. Perez has had a good start to the season, and as long as I stick on Verstappen and don't trust someone like Leclerc, like I said, it could very well be Leclerc. As long as I don't trust someone like Leclerc or Perez in this hole here. Oops, I just literally took out Perez for Perez, Leclerc in there. Then I feel like I'm going to fall away in budget, and I just don't want to do it. I feel like I'm going to get just bogged down, and it's giving me some fantasy anxiety. I'm not going to lie. Now, this team is probably where, like, in terms, well, actually, if I have Perez instead of Leclerc, this is probably more likely where I'm going. Although that said, Leclerc is like almost 2 million cheaper, so the potential to increase in budget, if it's based on like a points per million kind of ratio, then maybe Leclerc is actually better in terms of budget. This build is quite a good balance in terms of hopefully building a bit of budget with Perez, as well as also scoring a big amount of points, having those 2 heavy hitting constructors. And I think a lot of people will jump to this if they haven't already got this sort of build, and I am very happy to kind of go with this build. There is one other cheeky little build which I kind of don't hate, which could get some nice budget. So let me just have a quick look. It does involve the drastic of dropping the likes of Red Bull and bringing back in, although I've slagged him off a lot, Lance Stroll, bringing back in Aston Martin. So, well, for me, in fact, if I just reset it, let's just reset it so it's like this, so I can keep it nice and simple. So I do one transfer there and have these 2 as my constructors, because not going with Red Bull as a constructor, obviously, in terms of points, is probably going to hurt, but maybe some short-term pain could give me some longer-term gain in terms of budget. And in terms of gain in budget, this as a constructor base seems quite reasonable. That said, if Red Bull go up 0.1, 0.2, and Ferrari are only going up 0.3, is it worth the points lost to only go up 0.3 of Ferrari? And maybe not. But what this does do is enable some further changes around here. So you could look at if this is this particular build will be dependent on whether can't say his name again. Bearman is racing again, because obviously if Carlos Sainz come back at 18.5 or whatever he was, I won't be able to afford it with this. But getting Bearman in, keeping Verstappen 2 times, and just looking to gain budget with this build, I kind of like this as well. Not going to lie, this obviously relies on Perez not doing well, as opposed to putting the 2 times on Perez and having Red Bull constructed like complete polar opposite. Depending on which team direction I go, it's like I either want Perez to do really well, or I could really do with a DNF Perez with this sort of build. But yeah, in terms of building budget, obviously Bearman is not necessarily going to get as many points as last time, because he's not guaranteed to get that driver of the day again, although you never know, because people, he's made a bit of a name for himself, and even though I can't get his name right clearly, Bearman and Bearman or whatever the hell I said earlier, sorry about that. But yeah, I do think that if he just has another reasonable race, being sat at 15 million, he could well go up another, even if it's 0.5, I'll be kind of happy with it. So going with a team like this is pretty nice. If Oliver Bearman doesn't race in Australia and Sainz comes back, we could also kind of look at dropping Verstappen, and that enables to bring in like a couple of big guns like this, Leclerc and Perez. And again, this also looks pretty nice in terms of building budget, because you're looking at Perez that might go up 0.5 or a million, Leclerc that goes up hopefully 0.5 or a million, Ferrari go up 0.3, Aston Martin, as long as they sort of finish the race, I'm going to keep saying it, should go up another 0.5 or even a million. No, if Alonso's pretty good around Australia, I will admit. And as long as Stroll can finish the race, I'm going to keep saying this until I'm going to say it into reality. Then Aston Martin should hopefully also go up. So yeah, I don't know if this is just me being a bit too drastic and panicking to some extent about my budget and getting left behind, but I think this actually looks kind of good in terms of not just points potential, but also gaining budget. And the big downside is there's no Verstappen cover, obviously, and that's a big downside, no doubt. But I am starting to think heavily about budget gain. I don't know what you guys are thinking. Am I getting a bit over the top with my budget gain ideas? I do think it's very important though, because like I said, if in the next week or two some people are able to afford Verstappen 2 times with the Ferrari Red Bull constructor, and I'm still scrambling around with the Aston Martins or whatever, I'm just going to get left behind. It's going to be really hard to overcome. And each week, those people that can afford that are just going to be slowly accruing an extra 10 points here, an extra 20 points, 30 points even. I don't know exactly how many points it'll be worth, but I think it will be worth sizable amounts. And it's not a grand amount each week, but over the course of several weeks, until I can potentially afford that sort of team myself, I might have already lost out on like 100 points for I know, and 100 points is not that easy to win back in fantasy. So I am certainly, I keep using this word, but I am certainly a little bit anxious about my budget. So I am thinking of something a bit drastic. If I go away from the drasticness of budget, then I'll probably go back to, like I said, this kind of simple kind of swap out here, bring in budget guy of your choice. Like I said, I'm kind of leaning towards Hulkenberg. If I know a few people have mentioned the likes of like a Gasly or an Ocon in terms of Alpines, because they're going to qualify far back, and then that enables them to kind of move forward a bit in the race, or at least not fall back in the race. And I see that argument, but I also see the argument of Gasly didn't even complete a lap around Jeddah because of a reliability issue, and we know the Alpines, especially over the last couple of years, their reliability hasn't been especially great. So I'm a bit reticent to actually go for an Alpine at the moment. I think crazy as it sounds, I think I'd rather trust a Haas driver and go with a team like this. So in terms of kind of trying to balance points gain and budget gain, I think this is probably the sensible kind of go between. But I am open to the kind of drastic budget builder. Emergency budget building parachute has been deployed, and I want to try and capitalize on any more Behrman increases and Ferrari and Aston Martin increases. I don't know, but I'm very curious to know what you guys think in terms of this budget, because I know a lot of this focus has been on this video has been more about budget building as opposed to team selection. And I think that it's very important to get the right balance, and I don't know how far to go in each direction. Obviously, we still got, like I say, as of the time of recording, about a week until the actual deadline, so I've still got plenty of time to think about this, and more news will come out. We'll get some understanding whether Sainz or Behrman is actually going to race. That could have some influence on things. But yeah, I'd be very curious to know what are your thoughts on the whole budget versus points gain. Obviously, if you can get both, fantastic, but I don't know if we can at the moment. If there's someone out there that can afford the Verstappen with these two constructors, then I'm quite jealous, I have to admit. Yeah, and in terms of the deadline, it's 5 a.m. for me, man. 5 a.m. How am I going to get up for that? I don't know. I might have to just set my alarm for like 4:30 or something, half an hour before deadline, have a quick blurry look at my phone and be like, yeah, I'm happy with that team, and just like pick a team, then go back to sleep and then hope for the best. And I don't know, maybe I'll get up for 5 a.m. I need to be a bit more committed, maybe, as if I'm fantasy manager. Like, can you imagine like the team principal just not turning up to the race? It's a bit early. It's just like, no, I want to sleep. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm thinking at the moment. There's several directions. I think in terms of just overall kind of point/budget, this is a fine build. I still also think that, sticking with this original build of Verstappen 2 times Aston Martin, just to hopefully claw up a bit of value, is also kind of fine, if a little unexciting. But yeah, in terms of this second build, I expect some people might ask, what do you think of this second build? Again, I think it's fine. I still think it's pretty well balanced, but we've seen that the Red Bulls are just ramming in the points. How many points? We've got 89, 90. Yeah, they're averaging basically. Whoops, just punched the microphone out of the way. Averaging 89.5 points already. You compare that to likes of Ferrari, who can't quite hit those heights, even though they had pretty good races both times. Mercedes, again, pretty underwhelming. Mercedes. I suppose I'll talk for a minute about Mercedes. Mercedes are just, they're just they say the same things every time. Like, it seems to be the last few years, year on year, there just seems to be things aren't quite right and they can't quite work things out, and they've got so much potential and they just need to unlock it, and they'll bring upgrades and it'll be fine. But now suddenly, like, the simulator isn't lining up to what they're seeing, and they're struggling to understand why they're bouncing through the high speed as opposed to just gliding through there. We all seen the footage, I'm sure, of Norris up ahead of Hamilton going through the high speed section in Jeddah, Hamilton just getting left behind by the McLaren, which, I haven't even mentioned McLaren in this video, but I think in terms of budget, I think they're still too expensive for me, so I'm kind of not going there. But yeah, in terms of Mercedes, I'm just kind of a bit like, yeah, I don't really want to get involved and have them. I'd rather, yeah, I just don't know. Like I say, compare Mercedes' performance to the Red Bulls, 36 and 42, and you're looking at the Red Bulls who are sitting on like 90. It's like more than double the points, and Mercedes need to really prove their worth before I'm kind of going near them. So this middle build for me is a little bit, I'm a bit put off of it because of the Mercedes. I mean, maybe the McLarens. I mean, let's see, in terms of McLaren, how far away are we from moving forward in this? About 1 million or so there, so we could quite easily drop Tsunoda, and then that can happily afford someone. Can't quite get to Hulkenberg. Who can we afford down here? Basically no one. So I guess Bottas, although, even the Saubers are a little bit unexciting because of their whole pit stop troubles, is slightly concerning, so doubling up on them means potentially not great. But then also Sargent in double Williams also doesn't look great. But yeah, I could potentially see, rather than Mercedes, if you want to go kind of McLaren, who just seem a lot more, I'm a lot more confident in terms of points potential for McLaren. They seem to have a lot better direction in terms of just where they're going, and their upgrades actually work, whereas the Mercedes just seem to go backwards. Again, Australia, this track is fairly high speed, so again should kind of suit the McLaren in that respect. So yeah, I think if I was sticking with this kind of big constructor build with Verstappen 2 times and I couldn't afford the Red Bulls, I'd be kind of tempted to go something like this, but I'm not overly excited by having the likes of Logan Sargent in my team. But maybe it's a small price to pay because Mercedes just aren't very exciting for me at the moment, so I'm kind of off this kind of middle build for now. So for me, yeah, it's kind of between build 1, build 2, or the budget bonanza build. So anyway, I've been talking for what feels like absolutely ever, mainly about Lance Stroll. I'm sorry, Lance. I'm sorry, but I just think it's time for you to hang up your gloves and let some other young blood come into F1. That'd be fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking, and if you could please tap a good team name into the comments for me, and I'd appreciate it. I'll pick one of them if any of them are suitable. So yeah, see you soon for some more F1 fantasy ramblings, nonsense, just absolute rubbish. I hope you've enjoyed it.